the woman who was never meant to be queen. In the year 1501, a girl was born who would one day change the history of England forever. Her name was Anne Boleyn. She was not born as a princess. She was not born with a crown waiting for her. She came from a noble family, but nobody could imagine that she would one day stand beside the most powerful king in England. Anne grew up with intelligence, confidence, and ambition. Unlike many women of her time, she received an impressive education. She spent years in European courts where she learned languages, culture, and the ways of royal life. When Anne returned to England, she was no longer the quiet young girl who had left. She had become a woman with a strong personality. She dressed differently. She spoke with confidence. And she had a presence that people could not ignore. At the royal court, everyone noticed her. But one person noticed her more than anyone else. King Henry VIII. Henry was one of the most powerful rulers in Europe. He had wealth. He had armies. He had a kingdom. But behind his royal image was a man searching for something he could not find. When Henry first saw Anne, he was fascinated by her. She was different from every woman he had known before. She did not simply accept his attention. She did not want to become another royal favorite. Anne wanted something much greater. She wanted respect. She wanted power. And most importantly, she wanted to become queen. But becoming Queen of England was not a simple dream. Because Henry already had a wife, Queen Catherine of Aragon. And the world was about to witness a royal struggle that would change England forever. A love story that would create a new church, a new marriage, and a new future for the entire nation. The love that changed England forever. When King Henry VIII fell in love with Anne Boleyn, he believed he had finally found the woman who could give him the future he wanted. But there was a major obstacle standing between them. Henry was already married to Queen Catherine of Aragon. Catherine had been Queen of England for many years. She was respected by the people and had always stood beside Henry as his loyal wife. But as time passed, Henry became desperate for one thing: a son. A male heir who could continue the Tudor dynasty. Henry believed that his marriage to Catherine could not give him the future he needed. He began searching for a way to end the marriage. But there was a problem. The Catholic Church refused to allow the king to divorce Catherine. The Pope would not accept Henry's request. The King of England had always followed the authority of the Church. But now Henry faced a choice. Accept the decision of the Church, or change the religious future of England forever. Anne Boleyn became the reason behind one of the greatest transformations in British history. Henry refused to give up. He used his power to challenge the authority that had controlled England for centuries. The king separated England from the Catholic Church. He created the Church of England and placed himself as the head of the new church. All of this happened because Henry wanted to marry Anne. Across England, people watched as the old world began to disappear. The woman who had once been only a lady at court was now at the center of a national crisis. Anne knew that becoming queen would come with a great price. She had gained the king's love. But she had also gained powerful enemies. Many people blamed her for the changes happening in England. Some believed she had taken the place of a beloved queen. Others feared the influence she had over the king. But Anne continued forward. She was closer than ever to achieving her greatest dream: the crown of England. Soon she would become queen. But history would show that a crown can bring glory, and it can also bring danger. The rise of a queen. In the year 1533, Anne Boleyn finally achieved what many believed was impossible. She became Queen of England. After years of struggle and political conflict, she entered the royal palace wearing the crown she had dreamed of. The woman who was once ignored by many was now the most powerful woman in the kingdom. Her marriage to Henry VIII changed the future of England forever. The people looked at their new queen with curiosity. Some admired her confidence and intelligence. Others blamed her for the changes that had divided the country. But inside the palace, Anne believed her greatest challenge was still ahead. She had gained the crown. But she needed to secure her position. Henry wanted one thing more than anything else: a son. A prince who would inherit the throne and continue the Tudor family line. and understood that the future of her marriage depended on giving the king the child he desired. In September 1533, Anne gave birth to a daughter. The child was named Elizabeth. Although Elizabeth was not the son Henry wanted, nobody knew at that moment that this little girl would one day become one of the greatest monarchs in English history. But for Anne, the birth of Elizabeth brought mixed emotions. She had given the king a child. Yet she had not given him the heir he desperately wanted. The pressure inside the royal court continued to grow. Every person around Anne watched her every move. Friends became rivals. Supporters became uncertain. And enemies waited for the moment when her position became weak. The same palace that had welcomed Anne as queen was slowly becoming a place filled with danger. Henry's love that had once seemed unstoppable began to change. The king who had fought an entire nation for Anne was now becoming impatient, and had reached the highest position a woman could achieve. But she was about to discover that holding on to a crown could be even harder than winning it. The queen who lost the king's love. After becoming Queen of England, Anne Boleyn believed she had finally secured her place in history. She had defeated impossible challenges. She had changed the religious future of England. She had received the crown she had always dreamed of. But behind the walls of the royal palace a new danger was growing. King Henry VIII was changing. The same king who had once risked everything for Anne was beginning to lose patience. Henry wanted a son more than anything. A male heir who would protect the future of the Tudor dynasty. But Anne had given birth to Elizabeth. A daughter who was not the child the king had hoped for. The pressure on Anne became stronger every day. The royal court was filled with rumors. People began questioning whether Anne could give the king the future he wanted. Henry started spending more time away from Anne. His attention moved toward other women at court. The love story that had once shocked the world was slowly turning into a tragedy. Anne knew that the king's affection was fading. She tried to remain strong. She continued to perform her duties as queen. But inside the palace many of her enemies were waiting. Those who had always disliked and saw an opportunity. They began spreading accusations against her. They wanted to remove the woman who had once held so much influence over the king. The queen who had once controlled the future of England was now fighting to protect her own life. The crown that had brought her power was becoming a heavy burden. And soon Anne Boleyn would discover that the greatest danger was not outside the palace. It was coming from the very man who had placed the crown upon her head. The fall of a queen. In the year 1536, the world that Anne Boleyn had built around herself began to collapse. The woman who had once stood beside the most powerful king in England was now facing her darkest days. Henry VIII had become distant. His love for Anne had disappeared. And the enemies who had waited for their chance finally moved against her. Anne was accused of serious crimes against the king. She was accused of betrayal and other acts that could destroy her reputation forever. Many historians believe that these accusations were created because powerful people wanted to remove her from the throne. The woman who had changed England was suddenly treated as a criminal. On the 2nd of May 1536, Anne Boleyn was arrested. She was taken away from the palace and brought to the Tower of London. The same place where many important figures from history had faced their final moments. As Anne entered the Tower, she must have remembered the day she entered London as a queen. A woman surrounded by celebration. A woman wearing a crown. Now she entered as a prisoner. Inside the Tower and waited for her fate. She knew that the king who once promised her everything had turned against her. The trial was filled with accusations and political pressure. Anne was found guilty. Her future was decided. The crown that had once represented her success was gone. The palace that had once celebrated her now became the place where her story would end. On the 19th of May 1536, Anne Boleyn walked to her execution. She faced death with courage and dignity. The queen who had changed England was gone. But her story was far from finished. Because the daughter she left behind would one day change the world. And the name Anne Boleyn would never be forgotten. The legacy of Anne Boleyn. The story of Anne Boleyn did not end on the day she lost her life. Although her time as queen was short, her influence on history was enormous. The daughter she left behind would become one of the greatest monarchs England had ever known. Her name was Elizabeth. Years after Anne's death, Elizabeth became Queen Elizabeth I. She ruled England for more than 40 years. Her reign became known as a golden age. During her time, England became stronger. The arts and literature flourished. Exploration expanded across the world. And the nation entered a new period of confidence and power. Many people remember Elizabeth as one of England's greatest rulers. But behind her success was the tragic story of her mother, Anne Boleyn. The woman who was once called a danger to the kingdom became the mother of a queen who changed history. Even today, historians continue to debate Anne's life. Some see her as an ambitious woman who wanted power. Others see her as a victim of a dangerous political world controlled by powerful men. But one thing is certain. Anne Boleyn was a woman who changed the course of England forever. Her love for Henry VIII changed the religion of the nation. Her rise to the throne changed the future of the monarchy. And her daughter Elizabeth changed the world. Anne's story is not only about tragedy. It is a story about ambition. It is a story about courage. It is a story about how one person's life can influence generations to come. She was a woman who gained a crown, lost everything, but left behind a legacy that would survive for centuries. This was the story of Anne Boleyn, the queen who lost everything, but changed history forever. The secrets behind the queen's fall. After Anne Boleyn entered the Tower of London, her world completely changed. Only a few years earlier she had walked through the streets of London as the new Queen of England. Thousands of people had gathered to see her. She had worn a crown. She had stood beside the king. But now she was alone inside a prison. The woman who once had the attention of the entire kingdom was waiting for a decision that would determine her fate. Behind her downfall were powerful people who wanted to remove her from the king's life. One of the most important figures during this time was Thomas Cromwell. He had once worked closely with Anne and Henry. He helped Henry create changes in England. But as Anne's influence began to weaken, their relationship changed. Cromwell understood that the king was no longer protecting Anne. He saw an opportunity to gain more power by removing the queen. Soon accusations began spreading around the royal court. Anne was accused of having relationships with other men. She was accused of betraying the king. These accusations shocked the people because Anne had once been the woman Henry fought the world to marry. Many historians believe that the evidence against Anne was weak and that the trial was influenced by politics. The king needed a way to end his marriage. And the people around him provided the reason. Anne faced a trial where the result seemed decided before it even began. She tried to defend herself. She tried to protect her honor. But the power of the king was stronger than her words. The queen who had once changed the future of England was now fighting for her life. Her crown was gone. Her power was gone. And only one question remained. How would Anne Boleyn face the final moments of her extraordinary story? The final days in the Tower of London. After her arrest, Anne Boleyn was taken to the Tower of London. For a woman who had once entered the palace as a future queen, this was a heartbreaking change of destiny. The Tower was not just a prison. It was a place where powerful people were brought when their lives were in danger. As Anne walked through the gates, she must have remembered the day she entered London years earlier. That day people celebrated her. They saw a woman who had captured the heart of the king. They believed she was beginning a new chapter in English history. But now the same city was watching her fall. Inside the tower, Anne waited for the trial that would decide her future. She was separated from the world outside. The royal court that once surrounded her had disappeared. Many of the people who had supported her were now silent. Anne knew that the situation was becoming impossible. The king who once promised to love her forever had turned against her. The trial began with accusations that could destroy her name forever. Anne was accused of crimes against the king. She stood before powerful men who already knew the decision they wanted. Despite the accusations, Anne remained calm. She continued to defend her honor. She refused to accept that she was the person they described. But in the world of Tudor England, the word of the king carried enormous power. Anne was found guilty. The woman who had changed the history of England was now condemned to death. When the news reached her, she faced the moment with courage. She did not beg for her life. She prepared herself for the end with dignity. The queen who once held the highest position in the kingdom was now waiting for her final day. Her story had moved from the royal palace to the darkest walls of the Tower. And soon the world would witness the final chapter of Anne Boleyn's tragic journey. The last morning of a queen. On the 19th of May 1536, the final day of Anne Boleyn's life arrived. The woman who had once dreamed of becoming Queen of England was now preparing to leave the world forever. The morning was quiet. Inside the Tower of London, Anne spent her final hours with courage and dignity. She knew that there was no escape from the decision that had already been made. The crown was gone. The palace was gone. The power she once held had disappeared. But her strength remained. Witnesses later described Anne as calm and composed. She prayed and prepared herself for her final moment. She did not want the world to remember her only as a fallen queen. She wanted to leave behind the image of a woman who faced her destiny with courage. Before her execution, Anne made her final statements. She spoke respectfully about the king. Some historians believe this was done to protect her family and those close to her. The moment arrived when Anne was taken to the place of execution. The crowd watched as the Queen of England faced the end of her journey. Only 3 years earlier she had worn the royal crown. Now she stood without it. But even in her final moments, Anne showed the confidence that had defined her entire life. Her life ended that day. But her story did not. The woman who was accused and forgotten by many became one of the most remembered figures in British history. Her death changed the future of the monarchy, because the daughter she left behind would one day sit on the same throne her mother had once occupied. Anne Boleyn lost her crown. She lost her life. But she left behind a legacy that would last for centuries. The legacy of a queen who changed history. The story of Anne Boleyn did not end on the day she lost her life. Although her reign as queen lasted only a short time, her influence on England lasted for generations. After Anne's death, many people remembered her as a tragic figure. A woman who rose from a noble family to become queen. A woman who changed the religion of an entire nation. A woman whose life was destroyed by the same king who once fought to marry her. But history would reveal something unexpected. Anne Boleyn's greatest influence came through her daughter, Elizabeth. The child who was once considered a disappointment because she was not the son Henry wanted would become one of England's greatest monarchs. Elizabeth I ruled England for more than 40 years. Her reign became known as a golden age. During her time, England became a powerful nation. Exploration expanded. Culture and literature flourished. And the country entered one of the most famous periods in British history. Every achievement of Elizabeth carried a connection to the mother she barely knew. Anne Boleyn's life had been filled with ambition, love, and tragedy. She wanted to become queen. She achieved that dream. But she paid a terrible price. Her story remains one of the most dramatic examples of how quickly power can change. One day a person can stand at the center of the world. And the next day everything can disappear. Anne Boleyn was not just a queen who lost her crown. She was a woman who changed the course of England forever. Her marriage to Henry VIII transformed the country's religion. Her daughter transformed the future of the monarchy. And her story continues to inspire historians and audiences around the world. Centuries later, people still ask the same questions. Was Anne Boleyn a victim of royal politics? Was she an ambitious woman who challenged the rules of her time? Or was she simply a woman who fell into a dangerous game of power? The truth may never be fully known. But one thing is certain. Anne Boleyn's name will never disappear from history. This was the story of the queen who lost everything, but changed England forever.